Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Every Rockie Ever, a Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Rocky Mountain Rooftop Network, which is a proud member of the Fans First Sports Network. I'm your host, Skyler Timmins, and joined always here by my brother, Dustin, sporting our Rockies hats. I have my Mariners shirt on still, as we were recording this back-to-back with our Michael Kadire one, partly for good reason. But when you're hearing this, it's been a couple weeks. So hopefully the Nuggets have won the championship by now. Hopefully. But keep rolling things right along here. We won't spend too much time with our chit-chat because that's not how we really are as individuals anyway. But when we talked about Michael Kadire, we kind of wanted to pair him with another guy as a follow-up. And his fellow longtime Twins teammate, it's the former MVP, the Canadian first baseman, former slugger. I believe he's in the Canadian Sports Hall of Fame somewhere as well. One Justin Morneau, who was called in to fill in some very big shoes when the Rockies signed him to a 2-year deal in 2014. And as always, I'll hand it over to Dustin for the Morneau breakdown of his career.
All right. We got Justin Morneau, first baseman, batted left and threw right. He is from New Westminster, Canada. He was drafted by the Twins in the third round of the 1999 draft, and he made his major league debut in 2003 versus the Colorado Rockies and threw out 2 hits. He played his last game in 2016 versus Minnesota as a member of the White Sox. For the Rockies, he wore number 33, which some people might look a little funny. He did get permission from Larry Walker to wear that, another fellow Canadian, and just played 2 years with the Rockies. In his career, he played those 11 years for Minnesota and then was traded to the Pirates and then signed with the Rockies for 2 years in 2014, 2015. And then he signed with the White Sox and played a few games and then ended up retiring from baseball there. But with the Rockies, he did win a batting title in 2014. No controversy there at all.
None whatsoever.
None.
Walt Weiss is free of any blame.
Isn't he of a lot?
But yeah, was it 14 years in the big leagues for Morneau? Ended up as a career 281 hitter, 348 on base, 481 slugging, and ended up with 247 home runs, 985 RBIs in his career, and had 349 doubles, 23 triples for the big man. But yeah, there in that Rockies uniform, looks like he ended up really solid 316 average, 363 on base, 487 average, all of which were pretty good for his career. Ended up with 20 home runs total, 97 RBIs, 42 doubles, 6 triples, and 85 strikeouts to 47 walks. So some nice old school first baseman production out of Justin Morneau. And I guess where we can start here is just the signing of Morneau, because coming off that 2013 season, he seemed to just kind of be on his last legs because concussions and injuries had just kind of derailed his career in Minnesota near the end. He gets traded over to the Pirates, just more or less as kind of a salary dump type of thing, or to bid farewell, but we're not doing anything. Here's our last thing of go play for a good Pirates team who's bidding for the playoffs and need a first baseman. Coincidentally, he wore 66 with the Pirates because 33 was retired for Honus Wagner. And so he just doubled it. But Rockies found themselves after 2013 in need of a first baseman because future Hall of Famer Todd Helton had decided to retire, announced his retirement in August of that year, of that season. And so for the first time since, 1998?
97. Yeah,
98. They were going to need to look for a new first baseman, in Colorado. And could do a lot worse than a former MVP All-Star in Justin Morneau and bringing him in to fill the shoes there at first base.
Yeah, and you talked about how Michael Kadire was your free agent signing that the Rockies made that you were so pumped about. Justin Morneau was actually one of mine.
Me too.
We need a first baseman, and people forget how good he was. That stretch in Minnesota from 2006 to 2010, you could not find a better player than Justin Morneau. A great first baseman. He, the MVP in 2006. He was an all-star. He finished second in the MVP voting in 2008. And he was just monstrous, but then, the concussions, the play to the neck, to the head, and it just completely derailed everything. And it took him a long time to get through that. And I think one of those, the case of Justin Morneau is the problem with concussions and changing protocol and seeing these different symptoms that that are coming about, and now that there's more science and more studies about concussions. He was one of those guys that was like, look at this example of this is what he's going through, and it's no longer, you just got ring, you got the ringing in your head, get back up and rub some dirt on it. It's no, this is a real issue and we have to take care of it. And so when he signed with the Rockies, they Todd Helton, the Hall of Famer, leaves, and they bring in a former MVP, a solid ball player. And how many times have the Rockies brought in a guy and it rejuvenated their career, or they were able to squeeze out the last production out of them and con him into signing somewhere else and not having it not pan out. But they brought him in that first year in 2014. He played 135 games and he got that batting title at 319. Those were the astronomical numbers. He hit 17 home runs, but that's the same production they were getting out of Helton in the last years of his career. 82 RBI. That was solid.
Yeah, and he was like that comparison of whoever it was that could have been the heir to Todd Helton in the first season without Helton at first base. A hole that they've still haven't quite found a fill for since. Justin Morneau is one of the best and probably the perfect option to place in there because they more or less found a way to replace Todd Helton. A left-handed bat that had some power in it, solid glove at first base defensively. And I think I remember writing an article about this about a year or so ago for purpleroad.com about the odyssey of first baseman for the Rockies. And Justin Morneau has put up one of the best seasons since Todd Helton left, one of the best seasons by a first baseman out of Mark Reynolds, Ian Desmond, Daniel Murphy. CJ Crone is up there with him. Out of those four since that time, Justin Morneau is still top of the books, specifically for that 2014 season, which was kind of his last hurrah of basically like a comeback player of the year candidate at that time.
Yeah, and I going off of his, like I said before, those 2006 through 2010 seasons, I kept hoping that that's what he would be. Like, we could ride this out for a few years. They signed him to the 2-year deal, but I was like, this could be, he could rejuvenate and he could do it. He won the batting title, but it just didn't pan out.
Yeah, it just wasn't in the cards.
Dang it.
Still a solid year, and what little he was in those 49 games he was able to play in 2015, had a 310 average, was basically replicating his numbers from the year before. So I think there was a lot of personal victories for Justin Morneau, and no, that was a gamble for the Rockies. Of here's this guy who's diminished production, the health is still a question, but like you said, they were able to squeeze out the last bit of just really good baseball out of him before injuries then took hold, and then before father time and old age and injuries just kind of finally caught up to him there in 2015, and then goes on to 2016. But he was that guy that, man, same as Michael Kadire when Morneau was a free agent. I'm like, he would be a good pickup for the Rockies, and it's just a 2-year, $12.5 million. So a small drop in the bucket. It wasn't a really costly signing, and he turned in good results in at least one good season while they readjusted and figured out plans for who's going to play first base.
Yeah, and the one thing about his time with the Rockies, there wasn't a whole lot of like, whoa, those big career moments, but he did have a walk-off home run there in 2014, and those teams too didn't really do much.
Yeah,
but he was just one of those guys, that put on a Rockies uniform, and he's one that I'm glad he was part of the team. He was a Rocky, even though it was just for a real short time. But
yeah,
it's sad when these guys that they're so good, and when those injuries do take them out, and that you just kind of feel helpless for them, and how frustrating it is. I went through a bum shoulder that I wish, at one point I was, chucking that ball real good, and then, over time and things, then it's just not there anymore.
mm-hmm.
And it's sad to see when we see that going on. Um, they're doing real good, and we see this from some other former Rockies. Troy Tulowitzki. Once those ankle injuries started happening, then it's like, man, he's got the injury bug, and it's like, you don't know, you do not understand the grind that these major league ball players go through.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing with Morneau, like I said before, the concussion stuff, when things aren't right here, what's that old school mentality? Oh, well, you're soft, or
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to get hit in the head to get a concussion. A hit to the neck, a knee to the neck, anything like that can cause a concussion, can cause some serious damage.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a coach now, a high school coach of sports, and it's scary. And for him to get through that, took a little while, and to be able to go out there and still be a 300 hitter for those couple seasons. He had some really good career numbers, and he stayed in baseball a little bit after post playing, with the Twins. I think they're a great organization,
Mm-hmm.
and you hear a lot of these guys that go back and they're special advisors. They get into the minor league systems, or they go that broadcasting route.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been a part of that in his post playing career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think what's cool is just having that Rockies connection for him because, like many Canadian kids playing baseball, Larry Walker was their idol, and that's why he wore number 33 was because of Larry Walker.
Well, that too, and they won Patrick Waugh.
Yeah, and
You
so
know, with our Canadian brothers, man, it's all the hockey, and so Patrick Waugh, Larry Walker, dude, those guys in the Colorado Sports Hall of Fames,
mhm,
you know, the Mountain Rushmore filled with Canadians, man.
yeah, and it's cool if there was anybody that was going to wear 33 post Larry Walker, I'm okay with it being Justin Morneau because of what that means to him. And
For sure.
the Rockies hadn't retired the number; it'd been in circulation since 2004. And when he asked Larry Walker for permission, and Larry's like, "Yeah, sure, go ahead, I don't care," and gave him that blessing. And you know, he was worthy of it. That 2014 season, he was worthy of wearing that 33 in Colorado. Uh, I don't think he used "Crazy Train" as his walk-up song, though.
No, no, he did not. That'd be fun to look back and see what these guys had for for their things. But as we're doing our research on him, and you know, we like to get that personal thing about him, and just some of the information of how he was really superstitious,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, a lot of these guys are superstitious with their numbers, but his, you know, being a, it says as a hockey player, he would refuse to leave the car for hockey games until the clock read 33 minutes past the hour, or um, you know, different things to eat, the same routines. This, so they'd order the same sandwich from a Jimmy John's,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the funny ones that I've read is drinking a Slurpee from the Twins clubhouse that was half Mountain Dew, half red or orange flavor. You know, just some of those funny things uh, that the ball players do. You know, and then something cool else that it says about with his time with the Twins. Uh, it says that he mailed more than 200 personalized holiday gifts to Twins employees,
Mm-hmm.
including the Target Field grounds crew. And so once again, I think that was a win for the Rockies, bringing in a quality person
Mm-hmm.
uh, to the organization for that time that he was there.
Yeah, absolutely. There's something about those former Twins and some good
I
stuff coming
like
out of
him.
that organization.
I sure do like him.
But one last thing I wanted to touch on that before we close this one. I mentioned it while we were doing our research, but he did participate in that. That he was a final vote candidate for the All Star game in 2014, and it was going to be in Minnesota, so he was going to be able to get a homecoming. And I remember specifically the day on Twitter I was helping lead that campaign, just spending all day of it was when tweets the hashtag Vote Morneau would count as votes, and I think I spent like half the day. I started at 8 o'clock, and they were teaming up with Cleveland for a Cleveland Rocks. No final vote candidates. It was Justin Morneau, and I can't remember the Cleveland guy, but I remember I think it was started at like 8 o'clock in the morning. I went until polls closed at 2 o'clock, and just tweeting out "Vote Morneau" and making jokes and trying to get people to spread that vote out. He didn't get the final vote because a big old popularity contest is all-star voting is, but his teammate Troy Tulowitzki was the National League captain for the home run derby, and they were still able to make the special invites. And I think that was what was starting it even more, where anybody can come be in the home run derby. Doesn't even matter if you're voted in as an all-star or not. And I think Troy Tulowitzki recognized in the moment and what it would mean for Morneau and the people of Minnesota. Brings his teammate along. He doesn't do really anything in that home run derby, but has a nice special moment of returning back to Minnesota and having that moment to be able to say goodbye and say thank you to those fans. In a special way in his first time away from them, or in his first full season out of Minnesota, outside of the just randomly getting traded to the Pirates the previous year. So that was a cool moment that I remember for him, kind of in his Rockies tenure. Exciting stuff. But man, I wish he could have just hit some big tanks there at Target Field that season for that home run derby. But was not to be. But unless you have any last thoughts, Dustin, on Justin Morneau, I think we've quite a bit covered it.
Yeah, just short-lived, and I'm just glad he was a good quality player, and like I said, those were huge shoes to fill for going to first base for Todd Helton, and we're still struggling to find that solid replacement.
Mm-hmm.
You think you want a guy that would fill out his career at that position, and we still haven't had it.
Nope. But we caught glimpses of a guy that could have, if things had kind of been different for Justin Morneau. But still, like him and Cuddy, they're some of our favorites. This is kind of flash in the pan. Had some good seasons. Won batting titles back-to-back years for our former Minnesota Twins that became Rockies. But awesome guys. And hey, he's got a nice long broadcasting career ahead of him with Minnesota and doing all that stuff up there and whatnot. And he's already in the Hall of Fame in Canada. So he's got his credentials and his recognitions and everything. But that'll do it here for this edition of Every Rockie Ever, talking Justin Morneau. Always appreciate you all tuning in along with us. And as always, you can find me on Twitter at @sideline_crowd. You can follow Dustin at Mr. T Spanish. And let us know over at Every Rockie Ever. And you can let us know what your favorite Rockies are and what ones you want us to cover, so we can keep spreading this thing out and covering it as a community and just remembering some guys and talking about their careers, because they're pretty interesting fellows across the board, and more guys like Justin Morneau out there that we can chat about. But until next time, this has been Every Rockie Ever, and we'll see you next time. Farewell.
Adios.